Over the years, CSGO and subsequently CS2 have had a plethora of maps cycle through the competitive map pool. 1.6 classics such as Dust 2, Mirage and Nuke, joined up with a newer global offensive map such as Overpass and Anubis. In this video, I want to dive into what happens to a Counter-Strike map when it retires from active duty, and how can we make sure these maps live on for as long as possible. When CSGO launched, the active duty map pool was significantly smaller than the one we have today, having only 5 competitive maps. The 5 maps featured were Dust 2, Mirage, Train, Nuke and Inferno, and out of these original 5, only one has stood the test of time across both CSGO and CS2. These 5 maps held us for 2 majors before we saw our first significant change to the map pool, expanding it to 7 maps that we know and love today. This was also the first time we saw a map removed from active duty, Train, and in its place Cache was added alongside fan favourite map, Cobblestone, and a brand new Valve-made map, Overpass. So what happened to Train when it was removed, and why was it removed? First and foremost, Train was ported straight from CS Source into CSGO, and not updated the same way that Inferno, Dust 2 or Mirage had been, so that was the first major reason it was removed, to receive a much needed facelift. If you'd like to know more about the visual upgrade that Train received, I'll leave a link to my Operation Vanguard video in the top corner. Furthermore, the map just really wasn't played a great deal at the pro level, being only played 4 times at CSGO's first major, DreamHack Winter 2013, and a piss poor 3 times during Katowice 2014, CSGO's second major. It really was a no-brainer to remove the map for a more popular map, and especially to rework it to balance it better for CSGO. The map was remade and re-released into the reserved map pool, a map pool not used for professional play, featuring maps such as Aztec and the original Dust, which is where it stayed for 3 majors before being re-released into the active duty in place of Nuke. The map remained a mainstay of the map pool until it was removed for a second time following the Starladder Berlin major, where it replaced another map cooked in-house by Valve, The Ancient. The reason for it being removed? Well, like before, it was being played less and less at the pro level, as well as Valve having a habit of forcing their new maps into active duty, and Train seemed like the logical option to remove. Eventually, it would be reintroduced for the 2025 Blast Austin Major with another facelift and even more drastic map changes than the remake it received over a decade prior. Speaking of maps dying and coming back stronger, and as previously stated, Nuke is another map removed from active duty. Now, the reason for Nuke being removed is very, very simple. It was a heavily disliked map in the early days of CSGO due to being so incredibly CT-sided. 12-3 CT halves were not unheard of, and as a result was incredibly unfun to be on the receiving end of. Like Train before it, Nuke was removed from active duty for a significant overhaul, perhaps even more drastic than Train's, before being brought back into the game with Operation Wildfire. The map was completely rebuilt from the ground up, entirely changing its location from Germany to the United States, brightening up the map and adjusting timings and angles to try and balance the map more towards the T side. The map was ultimately reintroduced into the active duty pool in place of Inferno for the 2016 ESL Cologne Major, where it has stayed ever since. These days, Nuke is an absolute fan favourite for both casual players and pro players alike, and an absolute staple of the competitive map pool. In hindsight, it's incredibly obvious what Valve was doing with this 1-in, 1-out pattern, and the next map to be cycled out of the active duty map pool was Inferno. Now, unlike the other maps, Inferno wasn't particularly disliked. It was a favourite map from the early majors, but just started to visually show its age. And so off out of the active duty it went to go for a makeover, before being brought back with a gorgeous facelift in late 2016. This was a phenomenal upgrade to the previous version, making large sweeping changes to issues the map really struggled with before. Most notably, Banana was significantly opened up and improved. Similarly to Nuke, Inferno was only gone for a very short period of time before being brought back and has remained in the active duty map pool ever since. That being said, unlike Nuke, Inferno received yet another facelift in the jump from CSGO to CS2, but because of the jump to a new game, the map was never removed from the active duty map pool. Dust 2 was next on the remake list for Valve, and understandably so. By 2017 it was really starting to show its age and desperately needed some TLC. Following the E-League 2017 major, Dust 2 was swapped out of the map pool for Inferno, where it was tweaked behind the scenes. Interestingly, around this time there were significant amounts of alleged Source 2 leaks, and involved in these leaks were rumours and supposed screenshots of a new version of Dust 2, built entirely from Source 2. Ultimately, these didn't really seem to amount to anything, and Dust 2 was released back into the active duty before the 2018 Face It Major, unfortunately without a grand Source 2 upgrade. But unlike its previous map brothers, Dust 2 was not really received with the same excitement that Nuke and Inferno were. While those maps received changes to how they were fundamentally played, Dust 2 seemed almost entirely identical and didn't really fix any of the perceived problems with the map's layout. Interestingly, Dust 2 was removed for a second time following the 2022 Rio Major for a map that had recently won a MapCore project, Anubis, but more on that in a little bit. By now, people had gotten very used to the pattern of maps being removed and rebuilt from the ground up, so when Cobblestone was removed we had no reason to expect any different, but this was by far Valve's biggest fumble when making changes to maps. When Dust 2 came back to the map pool in 2018, Cobblestone was the map to be removed and disappeared for a facelift before being reintroduced around Halloween with a spooky theme and set at night. The night theme wouldn't last long, but to the dismay of the Counter-Strike community, the horrific changes stuck, and to add insult to injury, it never made its way back to the active duty. As of writing the script, Cobblestone was last seen in the active duty on April of 2018 and hasn't been seen in CS2 at all. There's been a few leaks suggesting that Cobblestone could make a return, but ultimately nothing has been confirmed. Cobblestone marks the first map to be cycled out of the map pool and not brought back. The first map to officially die, or at least for the foreseeable future. Speaking of maps that were doomed to never return, D-Cache was a fan favourite for many years, being a staple of the active duty map pool from 2014 all the way until March 2019, where it was replaced by Vertigo, demoting it to the reserved map group. It was common knowledge by this point that map creator FMPone had been working on a newer, updated version of Cache, and many people speculated that it would follow a similar pattern to the other Valve-made maps, where they disappear and return to the map pool with a fresh coat of paint. But ultimately, this never happened. Cache did indeed receive its facelift, first shown off at the ESL 1 New York show match, but later updated in-game, but never received the promotion back into the active duty that many fans expected. The map was never removed from CSGO, but remained in reserves until the launch of CS2, where it was removed entirely, but luckily was confirmed by FMPone to be being remade for the Source 2 engine. After months of leaks, FMPone released the map onto the workshop, but still no official game inclusion. Then, finally, in May 2025, it was all but confirmed that the rights to Cache had been sold to Valve, meaning that FMPone was no longer the one maintaining the map, and has been rumoured to be rebuilt yet again, but by Valve this time. But sadly, nothing has been confirmed just yet. As previously mentioned, Vertigo was the next map to hit the active duty map pool. The map had been in the game since 2013, however had always been a very non-competitive map. A silly map, often used for boosting and rather humorously coining the term Vertiglobals by people who queued nothing but Vertigo. This map change was a huge shock to the system, as nobody expected this historically unserious map to be updated so drastically and forced into the active duty map pool. This map would receive some significant changes over the course of its life in active duty. We lost one-way drops, various pathways opened and closed, we had insane boosts. Truly, Valve really tried to make Vertigo a successful competitive map, but I think eventually they just gave up. The map was regularly vetoed and not very well received, especially towards the end of its time in active duty. After a final last-ditch attempt by Valve by introducing this railing, Vertigo saw its removal from the active duty map pool following the 2024 Shanghai Major. I believe this to be the first map to be officially considered dead, as I see no reason for Valve to ever reintroduce it back into the map pool. But ultimately, we have another Valve-created map, the Overpass. Now, this was another map that was an absolute mainstay in the active duty pool for a great many years, surviving all the way from its addition in 2014 till after CS2's first major in 2024, meaning that it was a staple of the map pool for approximately a decade. Weirdly, this map was removed in favour of Dust 2, but it wasn't removed for being outdated, as it had just received a significant facelift from the jump from CSGO to CS2. To add to the strangeness of the situation, it was introduced back into the map pool following the Austin 2025 major, meaning it was only out of the active duty map pool for 2 majors, before taking up its rightful place in the active duty map pool. Unfortunately, it's too early in CS2's life to be able to say for certain, but there appears to be a pattern forming of a map being rotated in after each major so far. The final map to be removed from the active duty map pool and the most recent removal was Anubis, the map that replaced Dust 2 all the way back in 2022, and the map with the shortest stint in competitive play, next to only Vertigo. Anubis was an interesting addition to the active duty, due to it being originally a winner of the Exotic Places mapping contest hosted by Mapcore, meaning it was a community-created map similarly to Cache. However, Anubis was very openly acquired by Valve alongside Deep Tuscan, a long-time fan favourite map and another map rumoured to have been introduced into the active duty. Interestingly, Anubis was the only map to have its collection of skins obtainable exclusively through a purchasable package similar to a souvenir package. To this day, this is the only map-specific weapon collection to be treated this way. Ultimately, Anubis was removed, but due to it being relatively popular in the pro scene and in casual play, I suspect that we haven't seen the last of it just yet. As mentioned earlier, it's too early in CS2's life to say for certain if any of these maps being swapped out are gone forever, but there's definitely not a 0% chance of redemption. So, looking back on all the changes that Valve have made to the active duty map pool over the years, what would I do to change it? Well, my hot take is that I'd like to see some significant changes to the map pool. I'd love to remove 3 maps from the map pool, with Mirage and Dust being 2 of the most obvious, and with Inferno being my final vote. In their place, I'd add a remade version of Cache to fill the 3-lane map hole that Dust 2 and Mirage would have left. It's a fan favourite map, and an eagerly anticipated one, so it would be a good pick to replace some of the other fan favourites. Furthermore, I'd make the addition of a remade Cobblestone. My reasoning for this would be the replacement for Inferno, a unique setting and a larger feeling map compared to others in the pool, with the potential for more complex strats. Obviously, it's difficult to imagine what a remade Cobblestone would look like, but I think that Valve would tweak it over time until it was a brilliantly competitive map. And finally, filling the 3rd and final map slot, I'd introduce a brand new map, either cooked in-house by Valve or purchased off the community. I'd like to see a smaller map when compared to some other maps, but ultimately looking for a more unique feel, similarly to Anubis, but if it was smaller. I'd also like to see more urban maps or colourful and unique maps, as the current map pool is very dusty and bright. Now, this kind of massive change will never happen as it risks alienating a lot of existing players, but I think that a drastic shift would benefit the game in the long run. So many new strats, new potential plays, and sudden injection of freshness would certainly do a lot to improve the public perception of how Valve have treated CS2 over the last few years. If you've enjoyed this glance into the history of Counter-Strike's competitive map pool, please consider leaving a like and subscribing so you don't miss a future upload. And please, let me know what map in the map pool is your favourite and what changes would you make to the map pool. My favourite is Overpass, and I would love to see Inferno removed. Not because it's bad, but because I'm fed up of sitting behind smokes. I think you should check out this video on the left, and YouTube thinks you'll enjoy this video on the right. And after all is said and done, thank you so much for watching until the end. I really do appreciate the support.